Do it.
Let's do it.
Do it. Do it. Do it. Come on, sweetie. Do it.
Okay.
Do it.
You, Jimmie Allen,
I, Jimmie Allen.
got a bone to pick with you.
Okay.
You've been running around town. You've been on the airwaves. You've been causing trouble.
Okay. Is this a Mike Trout conversation?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
This is a Nebraska football conversation.
Okay.
10-2.
10-2.
I got a problem with this. Just, we can get into why we disagree, but
Sure.
why
Please do.
are you feeling double-digit wins,
So
near playoff appearance, I might add?
Dude, at 10-2, you're probably playoff appearance.
absolutely.
In
I
a
don't
12
think
team
it's
pot.
stability.
Yeah.
And-
But I think it matters what happens in the championship game, because at that point you'd probably be playing for a Big Ten championship.
Either way,
But
lofty.
I think context is important. This is something I deal with a lot when people are like, you said this. And I'm like, okay, well, you got to listen to the whole segment. And if you just turn on your radio and you hear it, I can't fault you for that. But I said, you could paint me the picture of how this team gets to 10-2. I did not say they were going 10-2. You could show me how they get there, though. And I'll tell you this, it's shout out to Keith, man. For the first time, I got credentials to get down to spring practice this year. And Keith and his team down in Lincoln are second in
SID?
yeah.
Okay.
Great guy, by the way. I don't know if you guys have had the chance to work with him. He'd be great to be on the show too, by the way. Just incredible. But
Paint me the picture.
yeah, I got to go down to spring practice this year, and the limited stuff we got to see, it doesn't even look like the same group of guys. I know there's a lot of changes, and there's clearly a big difference at quarterback. But the way the offense, like the thing I took away from the spring game wasn't the throws downfield. It wasn't the touchdowns. It wasn't that. It was the communication you saw from the offensive line. And that is where, like, talk about talent and skill all you want. That is where that department and that group has struggled the most, is being able to be on the same page and communicate fluently with their quarterback. Now, when you have a quarterback last year who was literally not even going to meetings in quarterback rooms a year ago prior to that, it's understandable how that could happen. But the one thing that you're going to see from a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterbacks coach standpoint is the fingerprints that on this offense that look like a professional style offense. When you talk about all three quarterbacks being able to signal flip coverage and have communication within their offensive line where everybody is on the same page, that's what you're going to have this season. And if you just look at what you had a year ago, and let's say for argument's sake, that defense takes a little bit of a step back. You have the 3-3-5 on film now. People are going to be a little less caught off guard by it. I don't think that's going to happen, but I can understand how it could. Again, you can paint a picture that gets me there. If you just throw that implementation in there where you're not having under pressure as much, you don't have the Ben Scott situation where he gets blown up against Wisconsin. There's that play that basically the whole game falls apart at that point, right? If you take just that away, you're talking about 2 or 3 more wins out of that. Now, you insert a 5-star quarterback into the situation and 2 guys in Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nayor that are legit D1, number 1 type wide receivers into the equation. That offense looks incredibly different. The running back room, though, has been like the biggest head scratcher for me, because all of the coaches have kind of openly talked about how that room has struggled a little bit, right? And from everything I saw, including the spring game, it looked okay. I mean, it definitely didn't look bad at any point.
Emmett Johnson.
I was expecting it to kind of be doom and gloom at certain situations, and the more I saw, and I think it's just they want more out of that room because the quarterback run element is going to be gone. Like, I know people are like, "Well, Dylan Raiola is going to be able to scramble and make plays." It's like they do not want him to do. They do not want him to do that.
Yeah, that is like last case scenario.
Yeah.
Like,
Heinrich Harburg is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your entire life, and I want him to have all the success in the world. But Dylan Raiola is your starter day one. And
UTEP, snap one, UTEP, Dylan Raiola.
Yes, without question.
Without question.
Yeah.
Why are you, I just want, hey, I'm just putting it out there.
And
making sure.
And here's why, because it's more about what coaches don't say than what they do say, right? You don't invite the talent level that you've had at the spring game and last weekend to Lincoln and have Dylan Raiola be the showcase of those events by accident.
If he's not the starting quarterback.
It's not by happenstance that happens. And it's not like he's a 3-star kid from Idaho who's just really talented and they're really happy to get and they think he's a good fit. No, this is one of the premier talents in the country that you put all of your recruiting efforts in to get here. You're not bringing him in to sit game one. You're just not. All bearing an injury.
So I'm no artist,
Sure.
and I cannot paint any pictures for you.
Okay.
Well, and
So
you're
I'm-
colorblind. so-
I am colorblind too.
So even if you did paint a picture,
Few people know
Probably
that.
look like crap.
I don't mention that daily or anything.
Sure.
But if you would,
It's a black shirt.
if you would help me paint this picture of
Mhm.
10-2,
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the obvious, which I think we could all agree is
The
Ohio
schedule.
State,
Yeah. Okay. And
Um,
USC. I think those are the two.
those are the two.
Those are the two.
Okay.
And here's the problem. I think Rutgers is going to be a lot better than people think they're going to
Oh,
this
yeah.
year. Greg Schiano has kind of turned a corner. They've got a quarterback that can play at the Big Ten level. Their offensive defensive line are taking a big step forward. I think Iowa, or maybe not Iowa, Illinois takes a big step back. I don't think they have any idea what they're doing in Madison. I really don't. I think they're kind of trying to build that plan. I think they're going to be fine. The state that they're in right now, I think looks probably a lot like Nebraska 2 years ago. And I think they're trying to build the plane while they're flying it. And when you have kind of a polished product like you have in Lincoln right now, and I think it's going to look polished. I really do. I think it's going to look completely different than what you saw a year ago. It's really hard to paint that as a loss for me. Now, if you look at, and I know people are like, there was obviously the stuff with Lincoln Riley trying to get out of the LSU game and all that. And nobody knows what USC is going to be. They still got Lincoln Riley and they're going to be fine, by the way.
if you go down the roster,
Yeah.
we said this about Florida baseball versus Nebraska
Yeah,
baseball.
yeah.
Nebraska's
more
the higher
talented.
seed, but you go down the roster.
How that
They have better
how that
people.
Florida team ended up in that situation makes no sense, by the way.
The
baseball.
USC thing is interesting just
Yeah.
because their defense couldn't cover a cough last year. And I
Well,
know they got a new
defensive
DC,
coordinator who had a
but-
top 15 or defense last year.
It's just like how fast can that translate to the
Sure.
Big Ten nonetheless?
There's this team that plays football down in Lincoln that did the same thing
Yeah.
a year ago. This guy named Troy, Tony White's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I get that. I just remember there was an adjustment period
Sure.
for some of these teams that come to the Big Ten. The
Yeah.
physicality is a little different.
Yeah, and I think
The style of play is a little different.
I think UCLA and Washington are going to struggle with that mightily.
Mm-hmm.
I think USC is going to have enough talent. I think there's going to be a struggle there, but the fact that it's out in
Yeah, in
LA,
Cal-
and
yeah.
that matters a lot to me. But I think Iowa's offense is going to be the exact same. I don't think.
Sure.
And if Nebraska just scores one more touchdown,
Hell, a
Yeah.
field goal.
yeah, right. I'm looking for insurance. I'm looking.
Yeah, I'll take.
I'm looking for a
insurance, yeah.
guarantee. I just think that I think it's going to be a down year for the Big Ten. It wouldn't surprise me if Oregon came in and was battle tested, ready day one. But I think they're the only team that's equipped to do that. USC probably still wins 8 or 9 games.
I think out of the 4 additions that are coming in, I do think Oregon is the most equipped
And it's-
to adjust
it's
quickly.
not even
For me,
close.
it's because
Yeah.
of Dan Lanning. I think Dan
Yeah.
Lanning's the
Yes.
dude.
An absolute great coach.
Dude could have gone to Alabama.
Having Dylan Gabriel helps too. He's going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
probably going to be your front runner for the Heisman.
Going back to the 10-2 discussion. And yeah, I know you said, you're going to paint me a picture like
Well, look at the way that's-
Michelangelo or
look-
Da Vinci.
Look at the way that schedule lines up. I mean, obviously UTEP isn't a world beater. I think that's all we need to say as far as that goes.
Sure.
You could convince me Colorado is going to be worse than they were a year ago. I think that whole situation is a nightmare and a disaster and is only going to get worse. Northern Iowa plays football.
At the FCS level. Yes, they do.
I am not going to talk down on Northern Iowa.
Shout out to Troy Dannon.
That's right.
Goes via
The last 7 years have showed us you never ever overlook any team.
Georgia
That's true.
Southern.
Georgia
baby.
Southern.
Hey,
I have nightmares about. to this
I
day.
remember
somebody in this room said live on the air that they were going to lose that game leading up to it, by the way, but that's neither here nor there.
Oh, was it Kyle?
No, it's probably Jimmie.
Probably agreed with me. Kyle's smart.
yeah, I'm sure Lloyd Carr back in 2007 was like, Appalachia, who?
Where are they?
Anyway.
Yeah.
No, okay, but you're going down the schedule a little bit.
Sure. So look at those first 7 games and find me a loss. Maybe it's Rutgers, but I mean, I don't know. Indiana's probably good. Indiana's upgraded at head coach, and I think it's going to take them a little while to get there.
Right.
But in those first 7 games, it's hard for me to find a loss. And if you look at the back end, I just told you about Wisconsin and Iowa and what I think about those situations.
Sure.
That gets you to 9. Now, if you could find a win in those other 3 games, there's your painted picture.
So I just think Nebraska football is such an anomaly in that you could literally watch every game that they've lost and go, if only they did this. But yet we do that every loss, every year, if only. And so I just
See, I think you can only have that mindset if you're expecting it to look like it has.
right. If you just look in the past, and
I don't think it's going to even look close to the same program that you've seen for the last 10 years.
and yeah, I mean, there's really no argument. There's really no argument I can have from that standpoint.
They're doing everything different. And I'm talking from a strength and conditioning program situation to the way they eat, the way they're scheduling, the way they eat, the way they run the training table, when they make practice available to people, the facilities they have now, the attention to detail that they're putting into the mental stage of the game, from having a team therapist that's available basically on call to everything is detail oriented. And the one thing you could point at, you could talk about all the one score you losses you want. Everything is because of a lack of attention to detail. And that is the one thing who head coach self-admittedly struggled with a year ago, that is putting all things in place to make sure that's not the case going forward.
Does special teams worry you though?
That's my biggest worry.
You got
people talk about, obviously it was funny to watch the kicker wearing the same color jersey tackle the guy housing a kick, but when you look at
Ja'Cory.
Yeah, when you look at the way Ja'Cory Barney, and maybe he's just that guy, and he could be, but my biggest takeaway in a negative connotation from the spring game was, man, there were some really wide open lanes and guys not running down discipline in their gaps on kickoff returns. And that was a big question for me. Tristan Alvano has been working. His grandfather actually butt dialed me outside when I walked in. That's kind of a weird thing. I called him back. Mike's fine. He's okay. He's been working with the Brown brothers in the offseason to kind of change his approach to kicking. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of comes into fruition and what it looks like and if it's any different. I think it's important to remember the kid was only a sophomore a year ago, and I know nobody wants to hear those excuses.
He's a true freshman.
Yeah, sorry. He's going to be a sophomore this year.
Yeah,
and it was his first time attempting kicks at that level. And yes, he had done in the stadium. And I know he's won a state championship and all that. It is completely different.